Do you want to stand with us, Tessa? Yes. Like, do you want me to? Okay, I just want to and Lenny is also in this thing. Candy? Candy?
Good to see you. How are you doing?
Good. I mean, you should be glad I don't have the same name.
I thought about it. Then I regret it. Okay. Oh, I dressed in your Okay, I'd like to get started. Thank you all for coming again. I think I've told everyone that I have a fear of people not showing up to my things, so I appreciate that you're all here. My name is Jessie Burke. I am the owner of the Society Hotel across the street with my husband Jonathan Cohen, and I'm also the chair of the Old Town Community Association. I'd like to share with everyone that before I start, my perspective comes from being the granddaughter of a Chinese immigrant, the daughter of a man who was paralyzed when I was 6. I grew up very, very poor. I'm a former social worker, a longtime small business owner, a mother of 3. We lost my husband's brother to a fentanyl overdose 4 years ago, and I have a cousin in prison for murder. So the landscape that we're in right now is not lost on me, and it's not just coming from a business owner with selfish intentions. This is all very, very personal to myself and everyone that is down here. I also want to make sure I add that I am from the East Coast. I know I shared this with you last time, and so the Portland Passive is not my first language. We're here to follow up as the halfway mark of the 90-day reset that I wrote for the city in early March. I want to talk about the wins we've had, the misses, and what's in progress. I want to share with you that I was discouraged by a few people about doing something midway because they were thinking it was better just at the end. And as someone that is very familiar with having to set goals and have metrics to meet along the way, it was important to me that we gave people a fighting chance to check in and see what we could do better if we need to pivot. So that's why we're doing this at the halfway point. And I want to make sure that we're paying attention to results. Everyone that knows me knows I talk a lot about the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And the last one is inattention to results. And so I want to make sure that at least our neighborhood is paying attention to the results. I intended to have 3 other speakers, but as of this morning, Scott Kerman from Blanchet House has a positive COVID test. And Camila Adams from Mimi's Fresh Teas has a family emergency. I do still have the lovely Steve Witcherly from Clean and Safe. And Ian Williams, a friend and fellow business owner in Old Town, will be joining us as well from Dead Stock Coffee. I want to talk briefly about the wins, even if the news is better sold as the bad news. But I think it's important because you can lose motivation if people don't know that something has gone right. Some of our wins from the goals that we have here, and if you need to see the status, they're color-coded. Some of our wins are that Clean and Safe did provide us with dedicated staffing. We have 3 dedicated staff just for Old Town and 1 dedicated trash truck. We did learn with trash that trash has always been scheduled for daily pickup, though I do think that writing it down on this piece of paper and telling the press about it made it actually happen every single day. Our requests for lighting, we did get more information, we did a study, and while there's some maintenance items that we can work on, like cutting some tree branches away from the lighting and some of the lights being out, the information we gathered was that really our property owners and our parking lots need to add more to their side of the buildings too, which would really help. So even more than just goals that the city and county need to do, we needed to do the assessment and find what we could do on our end. So those are wins. One big one that I want to call out that was not in the 90 days, but in the 4 to 12 months was graffiti. I cannot express how grateful I am to Corrine Perkins at the Office of Civic Life and their contractor Paul Watts, who really took this project under their wing as a pilot, and in the first 2 weeks cleared over 11,000 square feet of graffiti using 50 person hours and costing $70,000. Yeah. So I'm encouraged by the motivation and things to measure and how excited a lot of our bureaus were to have measurable goals to reach. Some of the items that we have in progress, we did ask for funding for additional lighting. While we did a study and there are creative ways that we could use it, the feedback we received was while they'll consider funding, there were concerns about dark sky advocates and what they might say about too much lighting in the neighborhood. And one other in progress that I'll share before I hand it over to Steve is the mental health response teams. You probably saw that Scott Kerman from Blanchet House was working with the county to put in place a peer support program to help de-escalate many of the crises that we're seeing in line at Blanchet House and throughout the neighborhood. When I did this press conference initially, there was no contract. And I know that the chair, in response to the press conference, replied that they were working with Blanchet House. And I just want to be clear, in part because I'm not Scott, and I can say this, is that the timeline was this. The money was approved in the fall bump. Scott received the contract about 2 weeks ago. The money expires at the end of June. He's confident that they'll be able to move it into the spring budget, but that Scott's greatest concern is the lack of urgency in trying to solve these problems on the ground, and that we were unable to navigate more quickly through our bureaucracies to get a contract faster to deal with a crisis that is happening every day. I'll follow up after Steve and Ian speak to talk a bit more about some of our misses, but to address more of the in progress, I'd like to hand it over to Steve Witcherly from Clean and Safe.
Thank you, Jesse. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Witcherly, and I am the Operations Director for the Enhanced Services District of Downtown Portland Clean and Safe. We joined the Old Town 90-day plan to provide additional janitorial and public safety services through our excellent contracted staff, some of which are here, to improve livability conditions in Old Town. We are very grateful and proud of our staff for their continued dedication and service, working hard in changing, uncertain, and sometimes dangerous conditions. As we all know, Old Town and Downtown have some very particular circumstances. In Old Town, we have a high density of tents and unsheltered community members living amongst some of our smaller and culturally specific businesses in a small area, prominently on numerous rights of way. Many problems coalesce to create an unsustainable environment where violence, unsafe and inhumane conditions persist, and business continuity is increasingly unattainable. It is within this environment where collectively we are endeavoring to improve conditions for all. Over the last 45 days, we've cleaned more graffiti, we've picked up more trash and litter day in and day out, we've worked with the city's impact reduction program to move tents from one location to another. The overall reduction in tents is about 15%, but we also see those moving to other neighborhoods too. The reality is that as we do this work, we find ourselves mobilizing resources to provide short-term solutions to long-term problems. We're not addressing the root causes of the challenges we face, not just in Old Town, but throughout the city. And our community problems are very graphic. We see them, we feel them, and we hear them as we encounter them firsthand. I'll give an example. Many of our businesses, and small and large, have property in Old Town. Many have some tenants leave and struggle to get tenants back into those properties, and have our unsheltered community living in proximity. Trash, needles, biohazards are persistently present. We visited a location on Friday for an assessment around trash, and our wonderful cleaning staff cleaned up over the weekend about 150 bags of trash. Of course, the root causes still exist. The place was cleaner, but the challenge for that business to find someone to lease that property or develop the property is increasingly frustrating and unattainable. On my walk back through Old Town, right here at the back of Lansu, I bumped into the 2800 bike unit and PPB officers responding to a deceased person. Very sad. A gentleman's life prematurely ended, suspected overdose. My background includes humanitarian aid work in a number of different environments and countries, and I can say with some certainty that living conditions in refugee camps and displaced person communities are somewhat better than what we find on our streets currently. To navigate a path towards long-term solutions for our long-term problems, we must look back at some of the decisions we've made. We have two major challenges as a city that are shaping the political narrative as we look to and support our elected and aspiring to be elected officials. One, of course, is camping and the needs of our unsheltered community and livability, and the other is public safety. As we look at long-term solutions, we must better understand the characteristics of our displaced community on the streets. It seems there's different needs, there's different subgroups. One group of our unsheltered neighbors could be characterized as folks who have come upon difficult times, loss of job, economic hardship, unaffordability, and access to housing. This group is perhaps most responsive to the opportunity for connection to resources, housing, employment, mental health care, shelter, and many of us have helped folks transition into those opportunities, and there are wonderful social service agencies we work with who are doing that great work. We too, as an enhanced service district, will be starting a community health outreach worker program to add more resources to that work. And through compassionate outreach, some of our unsheltered neighbors respond to the opportunity for help to decide and choose a different path. We commend the expansion of the Portland Street Response to provide more resources in this area. We also recognize the challenges of this service being deployed through a 911 system that is also understaffed and struggling to respond to increased call load. Portland Street Response works in situations where violence is not present and where people will voluntarily accept those services. We also commend the creation of the Street Services Coordination Center, where shelter and other resources for unsheltered community members are coordinated, updated, and made available for our first responder organizations to connect people to those resources as they encounter them. There's another group of our unsheltered community neighbors that do not have the capacity to voluntarily choose help. We see people suffering, struggling to meet basic needs and care for themselves, either through drug addiction or through mental health crisis or illness. And there are limited internal resources for folks to actually get free from addictions that are so hard to experience freedom from. There are limited options for us in that response. Of course, a police officer hold when someone is a danger to themselves or to someone else is a temporary nature. A civil commitment is a rare and long complicated judicial process whereby a person subject to a judge deciding if they are indeed experiencing mental illness should be required to accept mental health treatment due to a danger to being themselves or to someone else, or cannot provide for basic needs and safety. Or we do option 3, which is we do nothing. We respect a person's right to live in affliction, and we watch as our fellow neighbours or human beings languish in inhumane conditions until the point where crisis happens, to them or to someone else. I wonder if the gentleman behind here who passed away was someone who was just left to live in affliction. It's very sad. This is someone's son, someone's friend, someone's family. Could be someone we know. And if we listen to the experience of victims of personal property and violent crimes, both within the unsheltered community and the community within which our unsheltered neighbours live, there are those who prey on both the housed and unsheltered for criminal intent. Businesses, residents of Old Town experience and witness this day in and day out. We know that drug addiction and houselessness have intersections on many levels, including usage and selling and associated behaviours around illegal drugs that impact businesses and community members to sustain an addiction that can be so hard to experience freedom from. Lawlessness and violence can become the norm. We vacillate between the horror of it and the desensitization of it until we see it or experience it firsthand. This is increasingly, if not daily, an occurrence. And to address these issues requires a law enforcement approach. Yet we live in a city where many of us, we hitched our wagon to the disinvest in law enforcement narrative. And we are living with an understaffed, under-resourced, overworked, unappreciated police bureau that struggles to meet basic staffing needs and go from call to call to call, where necessity drives direction to the most severe crisis events first, leaving many people on hold. Of course, we must always be about reform. We must always be about accountability, adaptation, and change. But we cannot reform something we do not have. We need community-based public safety programs to work hand in hand with law enforcement. But we cannot cut one leg off the police bureau by taking away resources and ask them to run toward the future of the new kind of policing we want while stretching the bureau to its very core. That's not reasonable, that's not fair. We must always look at the decisions we collectively make. As we look at the intersection of drug use, drug addiction and drug activities, we must also look at Measure 110. Has this been a net positive or a net negative outcome? If we walk around Old Town and other areas and ask this question, did it achieve its intended outcome or not? While it increased funding for drug addiction services, and of course it's still very new, so has drug usage increased through permissibility and the associated behaviours and challenges around that in our communities. Access to treatment is now predominantly voluntary with reduced accountability. We also witnessed the disintegration of the city's community-based crime prevention programs, including the support and infrastructure for the annual National Night Out that saw over 300 community-based parties celebrated in the summer throughout the city. I remember the first one I went to as a crime prevention program administrator in 2019. It was at the Rosewood Initiative in East Portland, perhaps attended to by maybe 2,000 people, very diverse community, many nationalities, one of the most diverse events that celebrated multinational community that I've ever been to. I heard someone say the other day that reasonable moderation is a much harder place to sit in. Rather than be swayed by aspirations of one extreme to the other, it requires listening. It requires understanding all perspectives. It requires thoughtful expression of options and chartering a path that is specific, reasonable, time-bound, measurable, honest, and transparent. At Downtown Portland Clean and Safe, we will keep doing what we are doing to manage the current status quo and improve what we can control. To do the best we can through our excellent staff, who are the backbone, really, of what we do. To serve the people who live, work, and visit the Clean and Safe District, but we do need change. We need to come together and realistically design and develop a 5 to 10 year plan to review, redo, revisit, improve on some of these collective decisions we've made to rebuild and reinvest in public safety from top to bottom, from government to community and throughout, and ultimately to improve livability. We must also deeply look at the appropriate responses to the diverse characteristics that make up our houseless, unsheltered community, including support for people that we leave to languish in affliction who are unable to make a decision for change or care for their basic needs and are potentially a harm to self and others due to drug addiction or mental health crisis. And for accountability for those intent on opportunistic crime. We must develop a regulatory framework that's legal with the resources to implement to address these two core issues facing our city to allow us to compassionately restore Portland to a livable, thriving city filled with opportunity for all. At Downtown Portland Clean and Safe, we are very grateful for the opportunity to do what we do both in Old Town throughout the whole district. And thank you so much for coming today. Jesse.
I'd like to introduce my friend and fellow business owner, Ian Williams from Deadstock Coffee, who's going to speak to you about his small business perspective and experience in Old Town.
How y'all doing? My name is Ian Williams. I'm the owner of Deadstock Coffee. I apologize, I don't have papers, but I'm just going to speak from my experience, and so maybe that'll be a little bit more. I'm not saying that it was ingenuine, but I'm just going to tell you what I'm feeling. So I have a coffee shop just a couple blocks away. We've been out here for about 7 years now, doing coffee in the neighborhood. I'm very fortunate to be able to do so. This is the sneaker community. This is where the sneaker culture lives. But this is also where a lot of the culture in our city is, in this neighborhood. We're standing in the Lansu Garden. Beautiful space. When you're in there, you have no idea that you're in there until you look this way and you see Big Pink. So it's like it's a beautiful area, a beautiful neighborhood, and it's kind of sad that what it has been lately. To be honest, I don't really like to harp on like the negative, but I know that that's what this opportunity is, to tell you guys about what it's been like for us over the last up until 2020, and we'll say like COVID time, or up until the protests or riots, whatever you want to call it, we had only had one incident where we had somebody steal from us. From that moment, I would say about May until now, we've had 4 separate incidences where we've had people take the tip jar, take stuff from our team. We have never had any times where anybody's been like touched or hit or struck or anything like that. We've had quite a few incidences there in front of the shop. I can also speak to the experience of the other stores like laundry and produce, and which now produce has now moved. Compound is closed, which is where we first started. The neighborhood has been really bad, and I think one of the things that Jesse and I talked about this morning was that we just really can't tell. Before, there are people who are in this community who are experiencing houselessness, who've been out here since before I started coming down here to buy shoes at Compound when I was a kid. And they're part of the community. And so we wanted to be as connected and as close to the community as possible at all times. So there are people who I have known for years. And they made sure that everything was going all right. And now we really don't know. It's really difficult to differentiate between like who's really just having a hard time and who's out here to capitalize on what's going on, the lack of police that we have. And I know I see people from Clean and Safe out here right now who I see all the time. And I might not know their names, but I see them all the time. I say what's up to them. They're doing everything they can. Jessie and her team and everybody out here. I see the Hoxton, I see the auto shop, I see everybody, like I see the community out here. We're all doing everything we can, but after a while we kind of just, you just kind of stop asking, or you just kind of feel a little bit hopeless. And so they're still fighting, but to be honest, I'm running out of fight, and I'm not going anywhere, but it's really difficult. So I don't know what else you want me to say, Jesse. Yeah. Huh? Oh yeah. Shoot. All right, hold on. I'm not gonna lean on this because I eat snacks. But I found out yesterday that a good friend Terrence, one of the owners of Index, said it a long time ago. One does not simply turn left off of Burnside, and then and then I think probably about a year later, the left turn was put in on 4th, coming into Old Town. And that's a really big deal for us, for people to be able to access Old Town directly. Burnside itself is kind of weird to turn left off of, but that's a really big deal for us for people to come into this space, into the gardens, to come to the coffee shop, for people who are staying at the hotels in the neighborhood. And then I found out yesterday, when we were having a really nice meeting with Prosper, that the left turn was being taken away. And I don't know when it's gonna happen. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty pissed off. I didn't say anything for like 5 minutes because I just was like, there has to be a solution. But that's really gonna be detrimental to us, for people coming in to visit all the businesses in this neighborhood. Yeah, that was a big deal. Thank you for reminding me because I'm pissed about that. Yeah, right? Yeah, see? Yeah, y'all should be pissed too, all y'all screens. Yeah. All right, y'all got anything else for me? No, we good?
Questions at the end.
All right, tight.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I wanted Ian to mention the left turn because Ian told me when it was installed. And I remember reading and seeing how amazing that would be for our neighborhood. And I know it sounds petty and silly, but when your whole business is people getting to your storefront, it's a big deal. I know it's a huge deal for the Hoxton. I know it's a huge deal for Ian. And I honestly knew earlier, and I told Ian yesterday, I didn't have the heart to tell him until yesterday. Okay, I'd like to talk a bit about the misses that we have so far. Don't worry, it's the final segment of this, so we can get to questions. Everything else on this list that hasn't been addressed is a miss. I can go through it if you'd like, but just know we've had a moderate decline in tents. Clean and Safe gave us our cleaners. We have trash picked up every day anyway. The lighting is fine. Everything else on the list is a miss. We did just start the project with the county for Blanchet, but they haven't hired anyone yet because hiring is hard right now. I don't really want to spend a ton of time going through every single line item because there's something a lot more urgent on mine, I think everyone else's mind. And it's the homicides that happen in Old Town. And the homicides that happen are almost exclusively, if not exclusively, our homeless population. And it's because we can no longer differentiate between the predator and the prey. There was a week, 1 week's time, where one of our Portland police officers, one of the 2800s, came and was like, it's been a rough week. We've had 4 homicides, and it was weighing heavy even on them because we all knew the people that were killed. In April alone, almost half of the homicides were just in Old Town. So to say that again, in April alone, almost half the homicides in Portland were in Old Town. We had Jennifer Drain, a client of so many of our agencies, who during a mental break in her tent was killed execution style because she was making too much noise. Students at University of Oregon sitting in their classroom, windows facing NATO under the Burnside Bridge, witnessed another murder of Fars Gebri-Hiwot at 11 o'clock in the morning during class, also killed execution style. And we had Gabrielle Lynn Dozier, who's a client in Old Town but lived in Southwest, who was also murdered. And those are just the homicides. Those aren't addressing the overdose deaths. So I'd like to take just a few seconds to have a moment of silence for Jennifer, Gabrielle, and Fars, because they were all citizens here too, with beating hearts and their own tragic story, and lost their lives because our city and county lacked the urgency to find an immediate solution. So I'd just like to give them a second. We are proud to be the Compassion District. I didn't even know that that's what we were called, but a politician told me recently that that's what Old Town is referred to as. And as chair of the Old Town Community Association, I feel responsible for this neighborhood and for everyone that's here. It's a joint neighborhood and business association. So every resident, every business, every property owner, I feel is my responsibility. And because we are at this point unable to navigate and differentiate between the predator and the prey in Old Town, the 90-day goals where I had a 33% decline, I'm taking off the table. The goal for Old Town is that we need no human living on the sidewalk. It is not safe, and I will not pretend that even a small decline in our tents is improving our safety here. It makes no difference, it seems, and I will not allow predators to threaten, intimidate, assault, or murder anyone else as if their lives don't matter. I'm asking with urgency that our leadership at the city and county acknowledge our crisis with more than thoughts and prayers and more than bureaucratic delays. We need an emergency solution that will get our most vulnerable off of the sidewalks immediately and into some form of shelter, because anything is safer than this. And I want those preying on the vulnerable to no longer find Old Town a safe place for their foul play. In closing, I'll say, someone told me recently that as much as we need good leadership, we need good followership. We are failing at this as a city. We cut the legs off of an idea before it even has a chance to plant roots. And we have to commit to leadership to try any and every possible solution to solve our collective problems. And just as we need good followership, we need our leaders to not bend so easily and so quickly at the slightest confrontation. We cannot fear conflict and hope to lead a city or county. You must lead knowing that you are the chosen leaders entrusted to do what you know is in our best interest. Thank you for all coming. We can answer any of your questions now if you have them for us. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, thank you. We'll take applause first.
My name is Brian Clerkley from Channel 8, and I was just wondering, where do you see the future of Old Town? And a lot of these issues are not addressed immediately, like the crime. You were saying like one of the major issues now is just crimes and homicides and thefts and stuff. If those are not addressed, do you ever see people coming back down here in large amounts?
So the question is, do we see a future for Old Town if this isn't addressed? I don't know. I feel like where we are right now is pretty close to bottom. We have almost all empty storefronts. We have very few customers walking down our streets. There are always more people having a mental break or going through a high or assaulting someone than there are regular customers right now. And it's hard to say because I don't want to scare anyone off, but there is a ratio issue. I know people are afraid to come down here, and it's a bit of a chicken and the egg, right? We won a grant recently to do a billboard campaign where I wanted to say Portland isn't Portland without Portlanders. This is a tourist district, and people want to experience Portland. And a large part of Portland's culture and identity are the people that live here. And the people aren't here, and we need them to show up for us too. So I don't know what the future is if we don't do it, but I think it looks a lot like it does right now.
The first time you had this, you said towards the end that the city commissioners weren't helping, right? Is there
I mean,
any
we have a lot of meetings.
Yeah, but they're not really. Are they jumping in yet, county and city?
I'll say that the question is, are the city and county helping? I know that everyone is concerned, and I've been really encouraged by a lot of the bureau staff having something measurable to work towards. It was actually really remarkable to see that having something tangible to work on was awesome, because everything is so existential that we're tasked with. thing that concerns me is that because no one is down here that works at the city or the county, regardless of what they say in the paper, no one is down here. Maybe they're here 1 or 2 days a week, but they are in an office and not on the ground. And certainly very few of the bureaus. There is not an urgency to solve this problem because it's not the same in any other neighborhood. This neighborhood is experiencing things that, Steve said it, like refugee camps operate better than this. And this is Portland, Oregon, USA.
Last time you said anybody that wants to criticize or get angry about the homeless here, come stand with you for 10 minutes
Yep,
in one spot.
yep.
Would you give that same kind of offer to a commissioner? And
Absolutely.
Would you hope they would take that?
The question is, if anyone doesn't believe me, what do I say to that? To which I did say, come on down to Chinatown. And one of the reporters actually followed up with me. And we stood in one spot several times. At one point, her cameraman was too nervous to go down one of the streets. And it's fair. That camera crew had been assaulted 6 times before meeting with us at different sites. We went to go look at Calskate because I wanted to give Howard a chance to show everyone what he was going through. And Howard had just installed roll-down shutters to help with the break-ins. I got there with the camera crew. They had just opened, and they said, good timing. Someone just shot through our front window. So, commissioners, county and city, anytime, any day, we'll stand outside for 15 minutes. And I want to say, I get a lot of communication response from city commissioners. I don't get the same response from the county. And I'm tired of the county getting a pass on this. Public health is the county's responsibility. And I know that they responded to my first press conference saying, most of this list isn't our responsibility, and we're already working with Blanchet House. They weren't working with Blanchet House at the time. And I think you've all sat on city council calls where people are screaming about things that the city doesn't even have any control over. I need the public to understand that they need to hold the county as accountable as they are the city. And I need the county to show up here because so much of this is their responsibility. Any other questions? No? All right, thank you all for coming.
It's been a long time.
I know.
Yeah. Hey, excellent job. Thank you. Yeah. Call me like perfect.